Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Let me get right to it here. First of all, a couple of corrections from the last episode and something actually to just sort of expand on a little bit and just kind of another question that came to mind. First of all, regarding the American Eagle stuff and all of that, as it continues, of course, to take place, in the past, they have had ads with overweight minority women within their ads in the past. And again, the company is owned by a Jewish man, at least the CEO is a Jewish man. So they certainly, again, know what a profit is. And again, as we are aware, Americana sells. The mistake that I made in the last episode had to do with American Eagle being tied up with sex crimes of some kind. I don't have any proof of that. In fact, it was Abercrombie and Fitch and the owner of that who was wrapped up in all of that when it came to, again, underage minors and sexually assaulting minors or sexually assaulting whomever their previous models, I guess. Either way, my apologies on that. I got those two completely confused and switched around. So it was actually Abercrombie and Fitch that was engaging in that. Anyway, my second point basically had to do with what I was talking about at the end with medical doctors. And medical doctors bringing up artificial intelligence in the future, and of course the whole digital medical record database, apparently that's going to be rolled out here for individuals, again, who frequent doctors' offices. Basically, a flip side of that coin is certainly when it comes to the use of AI. And again, like I said, we pretty much know that most doctors don't read charts, and they're really not in the business of preventative medicine, let alone prevention techniques, so to speak. But what if they were tied in with an AI system that actually provided them with prevention measures, like holistic prevention measures? I mean, that would be interesting. Again, would they outright deny it? And would they say, well, we can't have a preventative measure in place because if we have a preventative measure in place, then we won't have a patient anymore because the patient, again, will become healthier and therefore we won't make a profit. I think therein lies kind of the problem, of course, with the entire business, as we are well aware, is that if individuals are cured of what ails them, then they stop being a cash cow for said doctor, let alone the office, let alone the nurses who work within that particular profession, and that's the way that goes. But yeah, it's just a question. Again, I don't know if AI, I certainly don't think it's going to be a good thing going forward for the medical system, unless, of course, it's tailored more towards some kind of a preventative wavelength of operating. But again, that's up to the individual who creates it in the first place, and then we're sort of back to where we started. So just wanted to make mention of that. It'll be interesting to see, again, how this sort of rolls out and what actually happens, but I'm certain this will be something that's reported on in the future regarding, again, the behaviors of doctors and what exactly they are relying on when it comes to what they're telling their patients. And then, of course, are they actually giving them preventative measures, or are they just pushing more drugs on them? Certainly, we know they're pushing wearables, which is ridiculous. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with the preventative side of things. Okay, let me move on to this too. A couple of weeks ago, I put together a quick little Substack because I was receiving emails specifically regarding a Kenneth Paulin, who is a Canadian citizen, and he goes by Son of Enos on Gab and on X. He is a patriot of the highest order in Canada. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of people, of course, in Canada have been ticketed and cited for, and even jailed, as is the case with him, regarding freedom of speech, which they clearly don't have in Canada. And freedom of expression, which they also don't have, not to mention sharing factual evidence of real history regarding any number of subjects. But either way, let me get into this, because again, this kind of breaks it down a little more specifically. He was detained, Kenneth was, on Friday, June 20th, 2025, in North Bay, Ontario, Canada, by the North Bay Police Services Criminal Investigations Section, and they charged him with willful promotion of hatred and willful promotion of anti-Semitism. And there you have it. Again, if a person is being thrown in jail because they're calling out Jews, or they're bringing up, again, factual evidence from history that points to any number of things, which are probably all terrible, that right there should show you who your real enemy is. And again, the police making these arrests are, of course, culpable because they're just lackeys. They don't know any better, and they're not bright enough to, again, just say no when it comes to arresting someone for speaking freely or educating a group of people about something, specifically, again, on social media, which I believe this is exactly what he was doing. But he was basically, again, detained during that entire time and still remains in jail. He ended up taking a plea deal, and he has been, of course, detained for over 44 days. But here's what it says, again, specifically from his lawyer, a Victor Hugo Vaca II, if I'm not mistaken. They said on August 2nd, spoke to Kenny today. He was able to phone me. He is okay with his decision of taking the plea bargain. The bail hearing was a setup from the Crown, specifically to discriminate, it says, the surety with a video about him as a freedom fighter. It says he would have had to wait another 60 days for another bail hearing. So taking the 6 months was in his best interest. August 6th, they will set a date for the plea and then negotiate time served, so hopefully he will only do 3 months. And then he says, again, he just wants to thank everybody for supporting him and a number of other things. Again, one of his advocates, I should say here, openly says that it should be noted that so-called free speech advocates Alex Jones, Stu Peters, Mike Adams, SGT Report, David Hodges, and David Icke have been silent on this clear and present danger that impacts every non-Jew on earth. Yeah, this is a problem. Again, throwing individuals in jail, citing them, giving them a ticket because, again, they're openly speaking out or they're openly educating their fellow citizens about the world that we live in, that is a problem. It's actually the problem. In fact, on episode 646 of this show, I had a conversation with Canadian Christine Lahid, and she, again, was ticketed for being on social media and saying what people on social media say, which again is operating in freedom of speech and at the exact same time helping educate their fellow citizens about the world and the country that they live in. And again, if a person is ticketed for such things, it's because of the mob, of course. They use Bolshevik tactics, they circle the wagons, they all gang up on an individual, and then they turn them into their own government. Not knowing, of course, the long-term plan, which is that government seeks to go after those very individuals also. That if these individuals, again, who are working with one another to go after their fellow citizens for engaging in freedom of speech, government will come for them one day too. And they don't seem to understand that. That communism waits for nobody, and at the end of that day, as I've said before, the end of communism for everybody is exactly the same. It's their head up against a brick wall and a bullet right in the side of it. So again, I recommend praying for these two individuals again. Kenneth is doing 6 months or apparently going to do 6 months or maybe even just 3, but either way, for what? For speaking freely and telling the truth, educating their fellow citizens, again, that's tyranny, 100%. There's no way around it. It's always been that way. They've attempted it time and time again, of course, in our country. They've been successful to a great extent and also not been successful to a great extent. Again, even just sharing memes can get individuals' lives ruined, but people have got to stand up against this kind of thing. And of course, they use these people as examples in order to threaten and terrorize endless other people to get them to not do those things and not speak freely and not speak out against government and a number of other things. So we need to stand side by side with people like this because, again, these are good Canadians. These are good people. And they care about not only themselves, but their fellow citizens in the state of their country. So I'm going to move on here, but I wanted to mention that. And again, I'm receiving updates via email, so I'll find out what's going on with Kenneth's case in the future and how that all ends up panning out. Okay, moving on here. Senator Thune has basically stopped the ability for the Senate to make any more judicial appointments for President Trump. He, of course, is a traitor. And in the video where he was, again, openly saying that they're only going to be meeting twice a week over the next month for a set amount of hours, that they're not going to be conducting any business, which means they're not going to be making any votes of any kind. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins were sitting behind him, both nodding and smiling and agreeing with him and everything else. Thune has always been dirty. He's never been good. Again, old tweets always haunt people. He once tweeted that he wanted Donald Trump to leave the race. And that was back in 2016 after that, whatever it was, Hollywood Insider video of them, discussing women on the bus, so to speak, the locker room talk stuff. Look, again, you can't trust these people. And this right here, again, is continuing to expose a great many people. And one of the ways I think that Donald Trump, of course, does this is by openly complimenting these people in public, because he knows that he's going to be stabbed in the back. He knows that these individuals are blackmailed. He knows that they are bought and sold. And so when he compliments Thune, he's not really doing it because he likes him. He's doing it to expose him, so that when Thune pulls something like this, it gets more people to not like government and actually look at Donald Trump in a different light and say, wait, Donald Trump's trying to get something done, and now this is the person who Donald Trump complimented once, but now all of a sudden this individual is doing this particular thing or making this particular move, and it doesn't seem logical. So I think it's also being used again as a warfare strategy, basically, to get people to recognize who's dirty and who's not. And there's plenty of dirty people in Washington, if not all of them. So again, just wanted to make mention of that rather quickly here. There's also this, which is a good thing. Former FBI Director Chris Wray is criminally referred to the DOJ over claims he lied to Congress. I'm telling you, the lying to Congress thing is going to be the least of their worries. I mean, that's a very small inroad, I think, that's being made. But once these individuals get a hold of more evidence, which, let's face it, they already have it, then these individuals, again, can be charged with heavier crimes rather than just perjury, so to speak. So we'll see what happens with that going forward. There was also this, again, at the end of the week, of course, the Durham annex was released, and this has been making the rounds. In fact, I think it's now on my website, AmericanEducationFM.com, under the Government Documents tab. Here's a post from Catherine Herridge, who, of course, was wrapped up in all of this back in 2016, and she has a quick little summary here. It says the following on X, quote, "My 2016 reporting takes on new relevance with the release of the Durham Annex. President Obama did not want his legacy damaged by the Clinton email investigation. Clinton emails apparently vetted and approved for his BlackBerry." It then says, quote, "President Obama's high-security BlackBerry used a special process known as whitelisting. It says that only allowed it to take calls and messages from pre-approved contacts. Two former senior intelligence officials with knowledge of the setup told me in 2016, pointing to the details as further proof. The Obama White House knew Hillary Clinton's private account was used for government business. As the administration now acknowledges, Obama and Clinton emailed each other while she was helming the State Department. If received on his BlackBerry, the whitelisting safeguard means Clinton and other contacts would have had to have been approved as secure for data transmission, covering everything from emails to text to phone calls. The Obama BlackBerry would have also been configured to accept the communications. It says, quote, "Think of whitelisting like a bouncer in a VIP line at a party. If you are on the list, you get in. If you are not, you get bounced to the pavement," said Bob Gourley, former Chief Technology Officer, CTO for the DIA. It says a second former intelligence official, who asked to speak on background, described the same process for the president's BlackBerry, adding the timing is important. If ClintonEmail.com were whitelisted before March of 2015, it would further undercut administration statements. President Obama initially claimed in March of 2015, when the details of Clinton's secret server were first made public by the New York Times, that he only learned about the system from news reports along with everyone else. Of course you did. This guy has to hang. They all do. And she has a link here again to an October 26th, 2016 article from Fox News laying this out, specifically, of course, authored by Catherine herself. So there you go. They're all involved. We've all known this. Again, laid it out in Q drops. We knew it as it was happening. Even, again, this was all before the Q drops, but we knew what was going on. It was obviously a cover-up. And again, the one moment that should have hit everybody over the face like a frying pan was simply when James Comey came out in front of the cameras on July 5th of 2016 and openly said that, again, no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges against Clinton even though she mishandled classified information. She didn't do it to actually hurt anybody, so we're not going to charge her with anything. Again, they were all in on it. They were letting foreign governments look at these emails. They were letting foreign governments have access to her servers, which were kept in her bathroom, and so on and so on. But this is all being declassed, and it's all being exposed now. And again, it's being done for the public. It's being done to deliver a soft blow to the asleep public so that they can understand that this has been going on for a very long time. This was a part of the plan, was again to catch all of these individuals. They've been caught, and now, of course, years later, including 6 to 9 years later, this information again is being delivered to the public in a very digestible fashion. And of course, as it's been said, even Jonathan Turley said it, the reason that the media doesn't bring this up is because they were involved. To even make mention of any of this, and certainly even dedicate an entire show, let alone an entire day, which they should do, on all of this, would be basically reporting on their own negligence and their own inability to do their real jobs objectively, because let's face it, they weren't doing it back then and they're not doing it now. So again, all of this information is simply being rolled out for an asleep public to slowly, again, pay attention to it if they want to, but in the end, it's not going to matter. Because we were even told that the first arrest is going to shock the world. Now again, will that be Hillary Clinton? It might be. It might be Barack Obama. The arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, or even Jeffrey Epstein, that wasn't enough to bring everything down. That wasn't enough to get the attention of everybody, because by and large, before 2018, nobody knew who either one of those people were. They, of course, ran in their own circles, but they were not mentioned on mainstream media. They were not in the limelight, so to speak, among, again, a generally asleep populace. Most people, again, just did not know who they were. And as I've mentioned before, Jeffrey Epstein was first brought up in relation to his island, specifically called Epstein Island, in one of the Q posts, one of the very early ones. Again, just suggesting that people look into that and they start researching what that is and what's going on and a number of other things. And then, of course, here we are today. And we know what was going on. Now, here's the last point that I'll kind of make about this just for now. This really is one of those moments, too, where the individuals that were paying attention to Q posts, certainly back at the very beginning of October 28th of 2017, the first 2 to 3 Q posts that have ever been made, which again is Q post 1, 2, and 3, specifically has to do with Hillary Clinton. And yes, it has to do with the FBI and James Comey and a number of other things. But it specifically has to do again with Hillary Clinton being detained and or being arrested. For example, the very first Q post was on October 28th of 2017 at 4:44:28 p.m. And it says Hillary Clinton will be arrested between 7:45 a.m., 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Monday, the morning of October 30th, 2017. That was one of the first posts that was ever made, and of course it was made on that day to get people's attention. That was the point. Because again, no one had ever really openly made a statement like that before on the internet with such specificity. Now below it, Q expands on it and says HRC extradition already in motion effective yesterday with several countries in case of cross-border run. Passport approved to be flagged effective 10:30 at 12:01 a.m. Expect massive riots organized in defiance and others fleeing the U.S. to occur. United States military will conduct the operation while National Guard activated. proof check, locate a National Guard member, and ask if activated for duty 10:30 across most major cities. Now, the kicker is going to be this. And again, I know it's date fagging. I fully get it. And people would be like, whatever, that'll never happen. You know, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're a crazy person, whatever. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hillary Clinton is arrested on October 30th of this year for all of the crimes that we know that she's engaged in, and that's public, well, then that should tell everybody again that this is way more than what meets the eye. And sometimes it is exactly what we were told. That would be interesting again to see if that actually takes place. Again, it goes on with the second post, of course, being rather lengthy, but it continues and it says, Mockingbird, HRC detained, not arrested, and then it says yet in parentheses. It says, where is Huma? Follow Huma. Huma Abedin, of course. It says, this has nothing to do with Russia yet. Why does POTUS surround himself with generals? What is military intelligence? Why go around the three-letter agencies? What Supreme Court case allows for the use of military versus congressional assembled and approved agencies? It says, who has ultimate authority over our branches of military without approval conditions unless 90 plus in wartime conditions? What is the military code? Where is AW being held? Why? And AW stands for Anthony Weiner in this particular case. It says POTUS will not go on TV to address nation. POTUS must isolate himself to prevent negative optics. POTUS knew removing criminal rogue elements as a first step was essential to free and pass legislation. It says, who has access to everything classified? Do you believe HRC, Soros, Obama, etc. have more power than Trump? Fantasy. Whoever controls the office of the presidency controls this great land. They never believed for a moment they, Democrats and Republicans, would lose control. This is not a R versus D battle. Why did Soros donate all of his money recently? Why would he place all of his funds in ARC? It says Mockingbird 10/30/17. God bless fellow patriots, unquote. Again, time will tell on that. But for those who followed the posts at the time, those first two posts told people that Hillary would be arrested at the end of October. So, again, time will tell. But I did want to mention this too. I'm going to be on the Dangerous Info podcast with Jesse and Outcast on Monday here. So bounce over there and check that out if you would. We, of course, are going to be talking about this and many other subjects, to say the least, and should be a good time as always. So again, thanks for the invite, fellas. I really appreciate it. And we will be diving into more Q-related things and the board and kind of a history on the entire thing. And again, where people were communicating on the internet at the time, and then how that all expanded and then became ultimately what it's become. Not to mention, I'm going to point them and his audience into a direction again of a number of different videos specifically on Rumble that have to do with a lot of these posts and providing people, again, more proof that it's legit. I mean, it was an absolute military operation. There's no doubt about that. But it's just too bad, again, that people didn't follow it at the time and weren't paying attention to it, and that some of those people who weren't paying attention to it at the time still openly criticize it today like it doesn't matter. And that's just inaccurate. It most certainly matters, and it was very, very important, to say the least. All right, let me move on to this. We have this again. This is interesting as well. We'll see where this ends up going, because again, we were told in Q Post that voter fraud is always and has been always a very big problem in our country, and we know that. But this was from Joe Hoff specifically, outside of the Gateway Pundit, but it says President Trump authorizes voter roll investigation nationwide. It says he has signed an executive order here on preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections, and he signed that back in March of 25th. But it says this order is included in the article below, and it says this mandate will likely not be completed because the election system used in the United States are not in compliance with EAC relations. And the reason that he says that is because the executive order that was signed back in March mandates that the election systems throughout the country used in U.S. elections must be in compliance with EAC version 2.0 guidelines by September 21st of this year, 2025. It goes on, it says, besides the fact that we learned that the Dominion election systems used in Georgia in 2020 and 2024 are not secure. A bad actor could hack into them and change votes. This was included in a CISA report 2 years after the 2020 election. It says as states across the country realize that they are not legitimately going to be able to comply with President Trump's executive order related to election machines in the 2026 election, they now face another obstacle to their corrupt elections. President Trump has launched through the DOJ an investigation into voter rolls. This is a good thing. Again, it's going to motivate individuals to clean out their voter rolls, get the dead people off of their voter rolls, get the illegal aliens off of their voter rolls. And as we've seen even in the state of Texas, some of those districts have now shifted back toward Republican-controlled districts. This should be interesting going forward, no doubt about it. Again, if you recall, not just the stolen election of 2020, but his first election, of course, in 2016, there were endless maps out there and endless individuals, again, analyzing the data and openly saying that Donald Trump won basically every single state except for maybe New York or maybe a couple other states, whatever. But he basically won almost all of them, if not all of them. And he himself has publicly said that. Again, I don't think he would say it if he didn't actually know what the facts were. So we also know, again, when it comes to accountability regarding the whole Russia hoax and the treason and sedition and conspiracy to commit both, there was treason, sedition, and conspiracy to steal the 2020 election. And they let them do it. The good guys let the bad guys get away with it, so they thought. And then they stepped in it. And then they got caught. And now again, the slow disclosure of this to the public yet again is going to roll out in digestible forms. And individuals, again, are going to be fed this, whether they like it or not. And then at the end of that, there has to be a consequence for everybody involved. So this is going to get interesting going forward here. I think, again, the remainder of this year and certainly next are going to be highly entertaining when it comes to holding certain people accountable. It's the one thing we all long for. It's the one thing we haven't seen yet, by and large. But I think that the time is certainly at hand. And I would even go so far as to say I don't think there's going to be a lot of pushback. I think the vast majority of Americans are sick and tired of a lack of accountability, whether that's, again, in their personal life, their professional life, the job they hold, their working environment, whatever it may be, and then, of course, certainly with government and certainly with their country. If they see criminals go to jail who happen to be politicians that some of them voted for, I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air even for some of those individuals who voted for those people because they're probably upset with them too. So that's just my prediction on all of it, but who knows? We'll see what happens. In conclusion here for geopolitics, I want to mention this, and this will slide us right into education. Again, I've been over it at length, and you're well aware of this. Just the over-exhaustion of the use of the term anti-Semitism and all of the name-calling and the nonsense that gets used, and then, of course, the favoritism of Jewish students on college campuses as opposed to anybody else. That, again, apparently, you can't criticize anybody who happens to be Jewish, but you can criticize and demean and demoralize and destroy anybody else who, again, happens to not be Jewish. Cicely sent this my way the other day, and this was from Attorney General Pam Bondi, and then Neon Revolt over on X and even on Gab was commenting on this as well. I'm gonna describe this video very quickly, and again, it's a short little clip, but apparently there was a female student, again, apparently a white female student at the University of, Florida State University, rather, on Thursday, July 31st, and they were in a gym, or just outside of a gym on campus, and they appeared to walk up to a Jewish student wearing a shirt with a Star of Remphan on it, which of course is satanic, and people don't know that, which is too bad. But either way, he's wearing a shirt, and she apparently walks up and she says something to him free Palestine, you're stupid, you're ignorant, whatever, and then, attempts to slap the phone out of his hand and says, I don't care if you record me and blah, 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 it doesn't matter, put it on the internet and do whatever you want with it and whatever. Almost immediately, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, got involved. Again, it seems unnecessary, and that's putting it mildly, along with, of course, Leo Terrell, who's the anti-Semitism czar, so to speak, and Harmeet Dillon as well. Again, all these individuals were communicating with one another about this. Let me read this statement from Florida State University. It says, Florida State University is actively addressing an altercation between two students that has been widely shared on social media. The FSU Police Department has interviewed the students shown in the video. The matter is being reviewed for potential criminal charges and for charges under FSU Student Code of Conduct. While this process is underway, the student shown prominently in the video has been prohibited from returning to campus. Our commitment to swiftly and effectively responding to incidents of hate is unwavering. Well, that's not true. That's laughable, but whatever. It goes on, it says, we appreciate the prompt report of this incident, which allows us to address this instance of anti-Semitism without delay. They went on and said Florida State University strongly condemns anti-Semitism in all forms and follows Florida law which protects Jewish students and employees from discrimination motivated by anti-Semitism, harassment, intimidation, and violence. Well, see, that's the problem, is that everybody is supposed to be protected against all of that, regardless of their race. But again, we're making exceptions for Jewish students and then making the crime, or I should say the punishment, harsher than perhaps it has to be. It says support services have been offered to the victim on an immediate and ongoing basis. Other students who need supportive resources are encouraged to reach out to the university's Counseling and Psychological Services Department, because apparently you were, way too fragile for the real world. It says, or to the Department of Student Support and Transitions, and then that's the end of the statement. Here's the thing. First of all, I'll start off by saying this. The particular female student who did assault the Jewish student on film as the Jewish student was filming them, I don't condone assault of any kind, and she should know better than, again, to walk up and slap a student or slap a phone out of his hand or do whatever. If you want a name call, you get to do that. If you want to look at a person's t-shirt and say, I don't like your t-shirt, you're an idiot, and then walk away, you get to do that too. That's not anti-Semitism. Old anti strikes again. That's not it. What you don't get to do, of course, is engage in any kind of misdemeanor or felonious assault and or battery. I mean, you don't get to do that. And yes, even slapping a phone out of somebody's hand can be considered that. I mean, there are people who have been charged with felonies for throwing a drink in someone's face. So, again, people have to practice and understand, rather, discretion, and they have to understand that the legal system and certainly university settings are not going to be fair to one person or another. Again, I'm not condoning the physical assault of another, but the female student should know also about Bolshevism and how Bolshevism works. Again, these individuals wear the shirts that they wear, regardless of who it is, frankly, in order to agitate people. And then they, again, seek to get a response out of people that they disagree with. And then they seek to, of course, record said response. And then you can assume that they're always going to play the victim and then put it online for everybody to see and wring that dry as much as humanly possible, including getting the attention of the actual Attorney General of the United States, which, again, seems a bit much. Now, this is where, again, it becomes slightly even more problematic. Attorney General Pam Bondi, again, will get involved in something like this, but when whites are targeted on a particular college campus, you won't hear anything from them. She thanks President McCullough for his leadership and prompt action. Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Florida or anywhere else, and then she tags a bunch of other individuals. U.S. Attorney Jack Heekin are investigating this. There's nothing to investigate. And here's Congressman Randy Fine, who again is Jewish, out of Florida. He said the following on X regarding this. He said, under the Florida law that I authored and passed in 2019, this Muslim terrorist must be immediately expelled. It says, as a member of the U.S. House Education and Workforce Committee, I am personally calling at Florida State to ensure it is done. So first of all, if I was the female student who did, again, slap this student, who again is claiming to be Jewish and claiming to be a victim, I would get again a First Amendment lawyer, a freedom of expression lawyer. They're not going to be able to defend you on slapping the person or hitting them or, again, attempting to slap the phone out of their hand. But when you have a congressman calling you a Muslim terrorist, that's a bit extreme, because there's nothing Muslim about the girl and there's nothing terroristic about the girl. And then Randy Fine continues to go on because, again, he's Jewish and he can't keep his mouth shut when it comes to, again, going after people that he disagrees with. He said, quote, it only took one call. She has been suspended until an expulsion hearing and has been trespassed from the campus. In Florida, we don't mess around with Muslim terrorism. Now it's my job to make the rest of the country do the same. Again, Representative Randy Fine is probably on tape touching a kid. He probably is. Again, he is Israel first to the bone. He is not American. He does not care about anybody else other than, of course, his own Jewish race. He's letting everybody know that, and he's doubling down again with the Muslim terrorism comments. He should be sued. This is defamation. He's calling a woman who is not a Muslim, nor a terrorist, a Muslim terrorist. I mean, honestly, it's nuts. Then Harmeet Dillon chimes in and she says, pleased to report that this gal is already into the FO stage of the equation, thanks to the prompt, decisive action by at Florida State. Again, she would do well to just not comment. But at the end of the day, I would basically just say this. This continues to be a lesson here that if individuals who happen to be Jewish are waving a flag or they're wearing a shirt with their satanic star on it or they're doing whatever it is that they're doing, just let them do it. Just ignore them. Because they hate being ignored. They can't stand it. They love attention. They love getting it any way that they can, and they love playing the victim. So don't feed their fire. Don't give them the thing that they long for. This is what turn the other cheek means in moments like this. And again, this is a perfect example how assaulting somebody isn't going to accomplish anything. The female student isn't going to change anybody's mind about Jewish supremacy and everything else. I mean, they just aren't. But at the exact same time, the flip side of that coin is the Jewish student isn't accomplishing anything either. Because what are they doing? They're just, again, fulfilling the stereotype by saying, well, if somebody makes fun of me, then I've been the victim of anti-Semitism, and I'm going to record you, and then, of course, I'm going to put it online, and I'm going to, run it up the flagpole so everybody can see it, and I'm going to play the victim as much as humanly possible, and then I'll get back at you one way or another, and then you'll regret it, and then I'll be here and you won't be, and blah, blah, blah. It's just a giant headache for absolutely nothing. Just stay away from these people. Stay away from them. They're irrational. They're completely irrational. Again, Randy Fine, a Jewish representative, is openly calling a teenager a Muslim terrorist just because they were politically disagreeing with a Jewish student. Now, yeah, she slapped him or hit him or whatever, maybe once is all. But even so, she shouldn't have done that, clearly. But again, Muslim terrorist, give me a break. And if he wants to turn this into a nationwide thing where anybody who criticizes anybody who is Jewish, goes to jail or loses their job or gets kicked out of this place or that place, ladies and gentlemen, that right there should tell you who rules over you. And certainly who rules over Randy Fine, because he's as dirty gets. So yeah, just ignore him. Ignore him. And again, this is exactly why college campuses are absolute shitholes. I'm shocked that anybody, again, attends these environments. I mean, everybody has their own reasons, I suppose. Some, again, are doing it for sport. Some are doing it, again, because they have a career that they want to start. I mean, I kind of get that. But at the exact same time, those individuals have to understand that some people go to college and university just to be political. They go there just to flex whatever weak little political muscles they think they have in the name of activism, regardless of the so-called side that they want to take. That's not the reason for college either. That's not why they should go. But unfortunately, that's turned into the environment. It's become that, and it's become that on purpose because that was part of the plan. That's exactly what communists want. It's exactly what Bolsheviks want. And it's worked, and it's too bad. Because the irony in that particular conflict, that little situation between those two students, is they're both communists. I mean, that's the funny part. And it is funny. They're both on the left side of things. They're both left-wingers. They attend Florida State. It's a left-wing college. One of them happens to be Jewish. The other one, again, not Jewish. She's certainly not a Muslim terrorist. But even so, they're both left-wingers. They're both communists. We got it. They both voted for Joe Biden. And yet they're attacking one another. I mean, I find it just remarkably ironic and kind of funny. So, yeah. Again, those environments are only for a certain IQ. I would just invite people to choose environments that are more higher IQ. That's all. Okay. More on the education front. I got a few comments regarding this too, if you don't mind. President Trump signed the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition and the reestablishment of the Presidential Fitness Test. Now, let me get into this just very quickly. There's an old saying, as many of us in the education business are aware, those who can't do teach, those who can't teach, teach Jim. Herein lies the problem with a lot of this. First of all, the presidential fitness test isn't necessarily something that's really gone away. There have been different versions of it, certainly depending on the state and depending on the physical education standards that exist within said state. When I taught in Southwest Florida in the early 2000s, I was friends with a couple of the gym teachers who I worked with, one in particular, and I mean, they were good at what they did. They knew what they were doing. They were physically fit guys. They were strong. They exercised all the time, and you could look at them and know that they were physically fit, and they certainly were. They had, in Florida, their own version of the presidential test, and again, it was basically a self-assessment and a competition with oneself, not necessarily against other people, but of course you're looking at other people and what other people can and cannot do physically. And then of course you just try to do the best that you can do. And again, that's not necessarily a new thing, and it's not even necessarily a presidential fitness test, but it, again, is something that did exist back then. As we know in the past, the presidential fitness exam was way more rigorous. And it was, of course, nationwide on a grander scale. There were less excuse-making. I mean, it was pull-ups, it was wall climbing, it was the whole thing. I mean, everybody was doing it. And, of course, everybody was healthier back then. I'm not against, by any stretch of the imagination, individuals, again, engaging in a presidential fitness exam or, again, forming a committee to have individuals, again, athletes that President Trump is familiar with and knows and trusts, all get together in a room and talk about particular things and what they'd like to see happen nationwide and a number of other things. I would simply say this, that we don't need government to lead us in a healthy direction, because leading us in a healthy direction is something that the individual can do and lead themselves into anytime that they choose to. The health information that exists nationwide is so ubiquitous and in the palm of our hand that it doesn't take, again, presidential orders to do one thing or another. These presidential orders, of course, are designed to motivate. It's designed to basically say, look, we're coming. We're going to do this. We're going to put together these committees. We're going to put together conversations and people, and then those individuals are going to go out to their respective locations, and then they're going to advocate for this, and we want you to do the same. That's fine. Again, I'm not against that. But anybody can exercise any day of the week that they want, and you don't need a gym class to do it, nor a gym teacher to lead you. You don't need a gym teacher to teach you anything about dietary guidelines or a healthy lifestyle. Because by and large, again, many of them are not educated in those particular avenues. Not to mention the simple fact that gym class, by and large, is obsolete these days. It's completely obsolete. It is really only done within a K-12 school environment for the purpose of giving students a so-called physical education break, or a physical break. And then, of course, as we all know, one of the excuses that consistently gets used, in particular among special education students, is they'll openly say, well, those students need the physical activity in the middle of the day more so than perhaps others because it helps them learn. Again, I'm not doubting that physical exercise increases blood flow, thereby, again, increasing brain capacity and brain power, and allows an individual to pay attention to certain information better, I guess, during the course of, a very monotonous school day. I fully get it. However, that's not true with everybody, and that's kind of a weak excuse when it comes to, again, justifying the school system the way that it is designed. And again, you're in a classroom, you're listening to somebody talk to you for X amount of hours, and then you're in gym class and you're running around on recess or you're doing whatever, then you're breathing heavy and you're sweating and your muscles are pumping or whatever else, and then you're right back into a classroom having to sit still after all of that's happened. I mean, it's a bit counterproductive. The hypocrisy with some of this, of course, dates back to this sole question, I think, which is, how physically fit is the actual physical education instructor themselves? If a person is going to be subjected to physical education in school as a practice, then shouldn't the physical education teacher look the part? Again, I knew I had to look the part when I was a health education major. I knew that. I knew I had to quit smoking cigarettes. I knew I had to stop drinking. I knew I had to do those things, and I did. I didn't touch alcohol during the week. I stopped smoking. I did P90X. I did the whole exercise programs. I did the whole thing, and I looked the part, and I felt the part, which is important. However, a lot of people don't. And sadly, the business is not filled necessarily with the healthiest people, certainly even physical education classes. Again, it's very difficult for a so-called physical education student to take instruction from somebody who's morbidly obese, yelling at them, telling them again to do push-ups, sit-ups, and run a mile and whatever else. I've seen this happen, and it really is sad, and it again really is pathetic, and it's remarkably hypocritical. So my first suggestion would be that gym teachers pass nationwide a physical fitness exam, and if they can't pass it, then they don't get the job. I'd like to see that first. Second of all, I think part of this Let's Make America Healthy Again movement and all of this, it needs to lead people away from government and away from medical doctors and more towards self-learning and self-care, and figure out again what works best for the individual. Yes, it's a trial and error process. Everybody needs to figure out what that is and what works best for them. Again, if that's intermittent fasting, cutting back a little bit on what a person eats, maybe not eating as often, or 1,000 other things, again, you can download an app on your phone, for God's sakes, and you can figure out exactly what you want to do. I've always recommended the Beachbody app. I will always recommend that because, again, they have every kind of exercise program on there that you could possibly imagine, even for the severely handicapped. And on top of that, they have cooking programs on there as well, where they're making different kinds of foods and showing you recipes and a number of other things. But we don't need government, is the point. We don't need government for that. And if you're going to have, again, a presidential fitness exam, I want it to look like the 1960s. I want it to be so rigorous that teenagers are completely jacked and totally ripped in a healthy way. Again, not filling themselves with supplements and a number of other things, again, like creatine to build muscle and then, of course, potentially harm them as a result. Not to mention, of course, once they get done engaging in physical education in a K-12 school, they go into the cafeteria and they eat slop because they have to, again, put all the carbs back in their body because they're starving. And so they don't necessarily lunge for healthy things. This is part of the problem, and this is also why American K-12 schools don't hire dietitians or nutritionists. I mean, your average health education major and or health teacher in a school is not a dietitian nor a nutritionist, and neither is a gym teacher. It really is basically base level information by and large, depending on the instructor, of course. But we don't need that instruction because the instruction exists in the palm of our hand. Again, this is where artificial intelligence and or web searches and or technology is making the entire American K-12 education system obsolete. And the business doesn't know it yet. It hasn't figured it out, that it's actually adopted its replacement. So again, regarding this Presidential Council on Sports Fitness and Nutrition and the reestablishment of the Presidential Fitness Test, I'll simply say this regarding the executive order. I'm all for these individuals getting together and meeting. What I would like to see is I would like to see someone advocate for a removal from the government education system when it comes to physical fitness, because it is that government system that has made things as bad as they are, even from a physical education standpoint. I would like to see this government, again, commission, this presidential commission, advocate for individual learning on nutrition and diet and exercise and things of that nature on an individualized level, by reminding people that there's technology out there that is free, some of which you can pay for, a lot of which is free, and that alone should be more than enough for individuals, again, to accomplish what they want to accomplish from a physical and health well-being standpoint. That would be a very good thing if they were doing that. Because again, the government education system doesn't know what they've adopted. They've adopted their own replacement, and it's going to happen whether they like it or not. I mean, gym class, again, in the American K-12 school system is the one that most students seek to avoid. And they seek to avoid it by even engaging in physical activity through the school district as a replacement for physical education. Let me give you an example. My nephew is playing football. Now, it's not my decision. I'm not his parent. I wouldn't have him play football, but that's just me. But he's doing it to get out of physical education. He's doing it to get away from having to take gym class. And apparently, based on their school district, if you play a sport, you don't have to take physical education. Which means, what's physical education class left for? Who is it left for? And then, of course, there's online physical education in the government K-12 school program, which is equally as embarrassing. An acquaintance of mine sends their daughter to the local school district. At least they're enrolled in the local school district. However, they take all of their classes online. And they have straight A's, except for one class. Which class online do you think they have a B in? It's physical education. It's gym. And I should also state that this individual's daughter is not sedentary. They're physically active. They're in good shape. They're a teenager. They do what they do. But I think that just shows that the influence of a physical education class and or instruction on an individual is basically non-existent. There really is no influence there. Again, physical education class in a government school should be optional. It shouldn't be mandatory. It should be optional. But again, a lot of people are physically active outside of school all of the time, and then, of course, they go into a school setting with a physical education class and they don't take it seriously. Again, do they really need to be learning the rules of a game? I mean, we had to do that when I was in school. What's the rules of volleyball? What's this, what is this position called? How do they rotate? Which direction do they rotate? How do you keep score? Who cares? It doesn't matter. A gym teacher could quite literally do themselves out of a job by just putting the Beachbody workout program on a big screen in a gymnasium and look at the students and say, see those ripped people on that instructional video right now? Grab your calendar for the next 3 months because we're going to do every single exercise that they're doing. And we're all going to do them right here, right now. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to hit play on the projector screen that's attached to my cell phone, and you're going to do these exercises, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to sit down, or I'm going to do these exercises also with you, and then that's the end of it. Again, you don't need physical education standards. You don't even need a curriculum. All you have to do is hit play, and then do what the exercise people on the film are doing. But this doesn't happen in American schools, and therein lies the problem. They would be instructing themselves out of a job. My final point is that it's just far more sophisticated, I should say, and technologically sophisticated and far more common sense exists in the real world outside of the school environment, specifically gym class, as opposed to being in gym class and receiving whatever constrained instruction a specific gym teacher wants to provide for said students, again, based on whatever opinions they have or what they feel like doing on any given day or what, again, state standards tell them that they have to do. It's just absurd because that's not how the real world operates either. In the real world, they're not going to be playing games, physical education games with their peers, usually in the future. That's not usually the way that it works. But what will they be doing, potentially? They'll be exercising by themselves or with a friend or with, again, a spouse or something along those lines. That will be that. That will be it. See, that's a lifelong habit. That's a lifelong practice. Kickball is not. Learning the rules of volleyball is not. So, yeah. One is filled with common sense and one is not. That's all. This again is why people are opting out of physical education. It's not necessarily because they don't like to be physically active. It's because they don't like the class and they don't like the rules and they don't like the instruction. Because again, they can get more objective instruction in the palm of their hand by, again, looking up YouTube videos on physical instruction and physical programs that are free, that are far more, again, objective and strenuous and are going to produce more results. Again, this information is free, and it's in the palm of our hand, and anybody can look it up anytime they want and then apply it anytime they want, as frequently as they want. Or you can go to gym class and take your clothes off in front of strangers. It's your call, but, gym class is the laughingstock, by and large, when it comes to most classes in K-12 schools, and that's one of the major reasons why. So it'll be interesting to see, again, what these particular meetings produce and what they're actually advocating for. Because again, if there were a real presidential fitness test, you would be getting on the Beachbody app on your cell phone and doing those actual exercises, because that's lifelong learning and lifelong application of physical activity and practice in one's life, as opposed to a temporary gym class that a person takes for a semester. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole thing. Who knows? I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. All right, moving on. NPR. Yes, they're being defunded, thank God for it, and on their way out of being defunded, they have to twist the knife as much as humanly possible and blame Donald Trump for everything. There was this article on August 1st. I'm not going to read through it because it's far too long and beyond stupid. It was titled, "Today is the last day for many education department workers. Here's what they did." And then basically in the entire article, they highlight a couple of individuals, and a number of individuals, rather, who were like, well, I have 30 years of service, and I worked in the education department for grant management or political this management or that management or whatever, and I helped a lot of people, and I worked for all these different administrations, and I even worked for the first Donald Trump administration. And then they go on and they say, I didn't agree with everything that Donald Trump was having us do, but I did it anyway because it was my job and I cared about my job and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no one cares. Your entire department doesn't need to exist. The activities of the people that, again, worked within the education department can easily be outsourced to endless other departments. The Treasury Department for money, the DOJ, or, again, Attorney General's office, more specifically, of course, for laws that are being broken. Again, Office of Civil Rights doesn't have to exist within the education department. It can exist at the DOJ. It can exist at Homeland Security. It can exist lots of different places, but it's basically just one sob story after another of, again, these individuals talking about the job that they had for X amount of years, and here's how many people I helped, and here's the number of students that I assisted, and now I'm out of a job. Well, too bad. The whole department's going to be dismantled because it has to be. We just have to, again, solidify the fact that we need to get the right amount of congressmen and women in office to vote it out. And same thing with the Senate. We have to get the Senate to abolish it completely. Again, God forbid if somebody else takes over, and I don't see the other side ever winning ever again, although I know that, again, the back and forth of the left and the right is a complete lie. I'm well aware. But at the exact same time, if somebody who's more moderate seems to think that the Department of Education is worth it and needs to last, well, then they can just simply fill those positions back up again, maybe not at the level that it previously was under a so-called left-wing administration. But, we can't have that either, is my overall point. It has to be done away with completely. And then, of course, that trickles down to the state level, to where the state level starts closing schools because, again, people are waking up from the matrix. And they're realizing that if I have a healthy mind and a healthy body, I don't need to attend a brick-and-mortar school, which then, of course, falls back on the very point that I've brought up numerous times before, dating back almost to the inception of this show, which is that brick-and-mortar schools will be left for the physically handicapped and the mentally disabled. That it's not going to be for the able-bodied and the able-minded, because it can't be. There has to be, again, something else that siphons the awake people, or those who want to be awake, out of the system, and then thereby leaving the system that currently exists for those who, again, cannot do it on their own, can't read or write on their own, can't comprehend on their own, and need constant assistance. I understand that those people exist, and those individuals, again, have a right to an education, but given the fact that it's kind of dumbed down the way that it already is now, certainly the instruction, why not just leave it for those kinds of students then? I understand people would say that that's insulting, but I just think it's realistic. And I think that again, that's where this is all heading. Might happen in my lifetime, might take one or two more generations, who's to say? But I think that's the direction that we're going in. Let me give you two examples as to why I think this is also happening, and I think this should prove it, and certainly the dangerous environment that is the school environment. There was this story over on The Blaze. This is terrible. And again, it proves that these individuals don't know what they're doing, and how the job that a person has can, again, attract unhealthy people. And then these individuals, again, can take their unhealthy frustrations out on students themselves. This was from The Blaze. It was titled, "Several Texas School Staff Members, Including Superintendent, Charged After Video Captures Horrific Abuse of Special Needs Children." Again, there is video of this, and it's basically just these fat nobodies sitting down in a room, neglecting students, by and large, among other things, hitting students in the hands, and autistic students in the hands with objects. One particular so-called instructor, and let's face it, they're not really instructors, they're just daycare workers for a government school in Texas, but they're simulating slapping an autistic student across the face, even though they don't actually hit the student, but again, they still simulate it anyway. And then this one adult, again, who did that, walks away angry, and you can clearly see that she's angry and upset with the environment and the student and whatever else. Again, if a person is that upset and that angry around those kinds of students, then they're in the wrong profession. It's that simple. It's like, again, teachers who are physically attracted to their students. You're in the wrong profession, if that's your mind frame and that's what you're thinking about. Again, if you want to be fat, lazy, and stupid and sit in a chair and hit on an autistic kid who can't talk, you're in the wrong profession. It says this: earlier this year, Millsap Independent School District in Parker County, Texas, faced a federal lawsuit after allegations surfaced that two staff members, special education teacher Jennifer Dale and paraprofessional Paxton Bean, abused special needs students. And again, this was caught on video, probably cell phone, if not by another student, then certainly by another aide. It says here that the pair have been charged with official oppression. Bean was also hit with an additional felony charge of injury to a child. Millsap ISD Superintendent Mary Eddy Martin was charged with failure to report and intent to conceal the abuse allegations. It says that the lawsuit alleges that Dale and Bean physically abused special needs students, particularly a 10-year-old nonverbal autistic boy named Alex Cornelius. Video evidence shows Dale striking at Alex and Bean throwing an object at him, with additional claims of verbal and psychological abuse. Martin is accused of attempting to cover up the abuse by failing to report it to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services or local law enforcement as required by law. Martin also reportedly instructed a witness to destroy evidence. Dale, Bean, and Martin were arrested, indicted, and fired from Millsap ISD. 3 other educators, Jamie Riggs, Janine, good luck on that name, Badaroff, and Shannon Krause, were also indicted on misdemeanor charges for failure to report child abuse by a professional. When Sarah Gonzalez, Blaze TV host of Come and Take It, heard the story, all she could think was, quote, "If this had happened to my kid, I would be in jail right now," unquote. This happens in every American K-12 school district. Again, not new. This goes on all the time. And as I have said before, when it comes to superintendents and building administrators, covering these things up is standard procedure. Same thing with HR departments. It's standard procedure. It quite literally is their practice. It goes against their codes of conduct, but they don't care about that. They're only interested in image protection. They're only interested in hiding this kind of thing, which again is exactly why this was caught on a cell phone. The irony of even that is palpable, because now cell phone use by students has been outlawed in the state of Texas. Do you see where this is problematic? By not allowing students to use cell phones now in school, as an entire environment, let alone in a classroom, they're not going to be able to capture illegality on their phone, thereby making the school environment less safe. Again, this is a back and forth subject that I've brought up on the show on numerous occasions, but Greg Abbott has outlawed cell phones in Texas schools. This is going to be a problem, and this is going to decrease the amount of convictions that take place because they're not going to have the illegality caught on film. This is going to be an issue going forward. They adopted cell phones because students were already using them. That's why they adopted them, and again, they made them a part of their codes of conduct and standard procedure and a number of other things, that if you're going to have one, it needs to be off and blah, blah, blah. And that, of course, led to higher referral rates for discipline. And taking students' cell phones, which again turned into endless conflict, which we also saw on video footage, certainly over the last 10 plus years, and so on and so on. I mean, it's an exhausting subject because it's this constant hypocritical back and forth that exists with government and government schooling. So again, I think they're doing the exact same thing in the state of Ohio as well. This will be a problem because, again, students will not be able to catch the illegality of school employees, certainly when it comes to the abuse of their fellow peers within a school environment, because they're not going to be able to access their cell phone. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not safe environments. I just don't know what else to tell you. Government, again, is scheming behind the scenes and now in front of people's faces to take cell phones away from children, of course, and use the addictive, quote-unquote, excuse and say, well, they're addictive. And they're staring at pornography on their cell phones in classroom settings, and they're sending each other screenshots of their tests, and they're communicating with each other all day long, and they're cheating on tests, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not denying that all of that happens. It certainly happens and continues to happen. But the safety element alone is going to be a huge problem. Again, watching school fights take place, so to speak, on cell phones is going to diminish. The likelihood of being able to catch illegality and then, of course, law enforcement convict or charge, rather, and then a court of law convict a guilty party because they don't have it on film, that's going to happen too. So, yeah, this isn't going to fix any problem. It's actually going to make many problems within American K-12 schools, certainly in the state of Texas and other states that adopt similar legislation and laws. It's going to make them worse. Now, I have one final education story, and this actually kind of brings everything a little bit full circle, because this particular story encompasses everything that is wrong with the media, because there is a very specific lie within this particular story. First of all, A.W.R. Hawkins writes for Breitbart. Okay, Breitbart, of course, is a Jewish outlet, and that needs to be mentioned. And in this particular article, A.W.R. Hawkins doesn't actually... He doesn't do any of the writing on his own, by and large. He simply references a Daily Mail article. But here's the title of it. Police, it says, Texas mom armed 13-year-old son and helped him plot attack on school. They have a mugshot of the mother. She's got purple hair, face tattoos. She's clearly Hispanic, and there you go. It says purple-haired Texas mom Ashley Pardo faces charges for allegedly helping her son plan a mass shooting on Rhodes Middle School as way of rewarding him for babysitting, according to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail, again, is a left-wing Jewish outlet also. It says the school is located in San Antonio, Texas. It says the 33-year-old mom allegedly, quote, purchased ammunition, tactical gear, and loaded magazines for her 13-year-old son, unquote. It says law enforcement indicated the son, quote, drew chilling maps of his school marked suicide route, idolized white supremacist mass shooters, and planned to carry out a massacre. Now, I doubt that. Certainly the white supremacist and idolizing white supremacist mass shooters. I don't believe that. The mom is Hispanic. They live in San Antonio. The son is Hispanic. They live in San Antonio, Texas. Why would they want to go into a school and shoot up the place, let alone have the mother have her son do this? Her son is clearly not mentally well. The mother is clearly not mentally well. Again, they're both Hispanic and they live in Texas. They're probably not Donald Trump fans. So go into a school, shoot up the place, and we'll scheme all this out, but the police, again, are pointing to quote-unquote white supremacy. Give me a break. It says the Daily Mail pointed to an affidavit showing Pardo allegedly helped prepare her son for the attack in exchange for babysitting his siblings. It's a nice reward, not really. She was charged with aiding in the commission of terrorism. It notes that Pardo also faced charges of child endangerment, criminal negligence over an incident that occurred on March 3rd of 2023. While executing a search warrant on Pardo's residence, police found photos from 2023 showing her allegedly pointing a shotgun at an 11-month-old girl. She allegedly texted the photo to the girl's biological father, along with text saying the victim was, quote, being a brat. Needless to say, she's not going to be winning Parent of the Year awards anytime soon. But the local news outlet also referenced an affidavit which says that the photos show the girl kneeling on the bed on top of multiple blankets with a hand outstretched, reaching toward a black shotgun the defendant is holding, pointing at the victim's head. By court order, if Pardo is released on bond, she is prohibited from consuming alcohol or possessing a gun, unquote. Again, where's the white supremacist part? I like how they just, again, have to sprinkle that on top like that's a real thing. She's a Hispanic nutcase who's clearly in a gang of some kind with all the facial tattoos. She has 1982 tattooed on her neck, right on her throat. Yeah, and her son is a nutcase also. But again, it's because of white people. White supremacists taught them how to do this. They idolized white supremacy. Certainly the son, we can prove it. So says the police. Come on, give me a break. All this white bashing is just exhausting. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, a white person chopped it down. We promise, because we said so because we're the media. I mean, again, this fatigue, this white bashing fatigue is just that. It is exhausting. And on that note, I'll end with this one jab-related story. Norway's COVID vaccine chief, and Ari Stuetsberg, every single time, 53 years old, has died suddenly after not only taking continuous doses of mRNA shots and boosters, but single-handedly deploying the jabs across his nation. Berg served as the department director at Norway's Institute of Public Health, FHI, during the pandemic, which didn't exist. Berg acknowledged that the shots, quote, cause rare but more serious side effects, especially in younger people, unquote, and became skeptical of their effectiveness. Mr. Berg was struggling with a mysterious illness which his immune system wasn't able to overcome for the last couple of months. He is survived by his wife and 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, if we had a nickel for every single time one of these so-called doctors and or administrators and or proponents of the shots and all of the individuals that backed all of the measures and everything else and rammed these down people's throats, if we had a nickel for every single time one of them is dead by their own hand from their own poor advice, without questioning anything and just leaping before they're looking, we would all have bags and bags of nickels. And those bags are getting bigger by the day. The interesting part is that a lot of those individuals don't know that some of their colleagues, so to speak, within government were also doing 2 other things. They were pretending to take the shots when they weren't actually taking them, and telling people that they were injecting themselves with this when they actually weren't. Or they were filling out exemptions and just opting out of taking them in the first place, and telling people that that's what they were doing. But then, of course, you had other individuals like him who were jumping in head first, filling himself up with God knows how many shots on a constant basis, and well, now that's the result. That's the predictable end. Again, remember when Anthony Fauci went on Stephen Colbert's show, and then they stood up from the studio, they walked outside, they walked down the street to some dirty little pharmacy in downtown New York, and before you know it, they're sitting in a chair and Anthony Fauci's receiving a so-called another shot because he was due and it was time for him to receive another booster. I gotta receive another booster shot. And then they go in and they do it, and Colbert either got one or he didn't. I'm telling you, the deception is never ending. It's so tiring, but it's just never ending. And these people, I'm telling you, they're going to reap what they sow, because they always do. They just don't learn. They don't learn. Fortunately, a lot of people are learning, and they're not complying. Again, and not taking these shots, and, we're right around the corner from quote-unquote flu season, ladies and gentlemen. It's right around the corner. American schools are going to push these shots. More and more American schools, again, have done away with the exemption process and even the parental notification process, which means they can line up all these kids and start jabbing them with God knows what whenever they want. Parents had better be on top of this stuff if they're sending their children into these government meat grinders. And they'd better read all the fine print on all that first day of school paperwork, I'm telling you. And they'd better, again, know what their state law says about all of this. Because this is going to continue to ramp up, again, regardless of who's in the White House. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. As always, check out Monday night's episode live of the Dangerous Info podcast with Jesse James and Outcast. I will be over there joining those fellas for a conversation. And with that said, thanks for listening as always again, and I'll catch you on Wednesday and Monday night. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.